Testing 1, 2. G'day friends, welcome to today's video. This is going to be a big old Patreon recap. Do you want all the excuses as to why this is late? I'm sure you don't, but I've tried to film this a bunch of times already, and I always get hung up and I always get stuck in this point where I start to talk about money and it just gets too overwhelming, and I think no one's going to want to hear that and everyone's going to be really angry if I say this or say that. Any of my own personal opinions or expressions of, like, you know, worry and concern about certain things, I just thought, how do I keep this really diplomatic? And I've talked about it a million times already, kind of, you know, dropping hints here and there in certain videos about how stuff was going. I know in Patreon myself, I had already discussed a lot of the personal feelings I had along that 3-month journey, but I do just want to kind of eliminate all that stress and pressure today. Stress and pressure, and I just wanted to, like, talk to the camera, look at you guys, just say what I feel, and really preface it all with, this is just 100% my opinion based on a 3-month experiment that I did on Patreon. I hope none of it rubs you the wrong way. I hope it is insightful in some areas, but I also hope it illuminates any of the issues you maybe struggle with yourself on Patreon, or perhaps worried about going into Patreon. If you don't know how all of this came about, let's just start there. And I'm you know, I don't know how long this video is going to be. It's probably going to be quite chatty, but I've tried to set you up in a space with some background stuff to look at just in case. Also, okay, so one of my excuses was I look horrendous. I put on about 900 pounds, haven't shaved in weeks. I have like little koala fluff just growing outside here. I'm not getting a haircut anytime soon. Yeah, I just kind of fell apart, and I just worried that it's so stupid and it's so vain, but I thought if someone looked at me before I started Patreon, that video, and then compared it side by side like this, there'd be a split screen of like someone who'd just been through war or something. The transformation is quite dramatic. So there was totally a part of vanity that stopped me from filming it. The other part, like I said, I tried to film it a lot of times. I got hung up on the money bit, which I'm just not going to worry about today. It is what it is. If conversations about money are going to disturb you or upset you, please turn the video off or go and watch something else. Even if you don't like chatty videos, this is just going to be chatty. There's not going to be a whole lot going on. This is just, I'm just going to spill everything I felt and know about Patreon in my personal experience, which is, it's going to be different for everybody. So I've got a whole bunch of notes here, so I'm very prepared. Did that even look? Looks like there's a blank page. There's some writing there, we'll see. But yeah, so this will probably be like really choppy and, you know, it's spliced up and edited up some kind of fun way. I can't put this off any longer because I'll never get to it. It's already been about a month since I've left Patreon, and you know, the dust has settled on any issues that I had, and also, you know, my understanding's not getting any more clear. In fact, I'm just kind of leaving it in the past at this point, so I want to just talk to you about it. My other excuse was Inktober. For some reason, I thought it would be really great to do daily Inktober videos again. I thought it'd be really fun to do Whimsy Ween again. I thought it'd be really fun in my spare time to do hashtag Little Raven Inktober, and all while still running my Etsy shop, which I'm supposed to be doing Etsy shipping today. We'll see. Yeah, which is, it's, you know, it keeps me busy. It keeps a lot of my time occupied. So there's a bunch of reasons, but ultimately I just didn't get around to doing it well enough, and I thought, you know what, scrap it. Let's just do what we need to do. We're about 10 minutes in already and I haven't even said anything. Okay, so let me just say this much. This is all my personal opinion, so please take it with a grain of salt. If it doesn't speak to you, or if it does resonate with you in a bad way, I'm always available to chat privately. Anything you leave in the comment section, I don't moderate, so it just has your name attached to it, and if it's quite negative, I know people don't appreciate that. So personally, I don't care. If you've got anything you want to say, you can put it down there. Typically, I'll respond if I think there's a problem, but for the most part, I just hope that this comes across a bit more informative and a bit more eye-opening as far as the whole experience goes. For the most part, there's a lot of positive to it, but echoing off of the video that I put up last year about why I wasn't interested in Patreon and why I probably wouldn't do it, there's a lot that I felt like was validated through that process, but I've kind of changed my idea about Patreon and the way that I see it moving forward. So there's a whole bunch of stuff to unpack there, and I'm sure we'll just get to that. I did just want to apologize before we all start though. I said I would do it. I said that if Playtest Patreon worked, I would apologize for running my mouth, so this is my apology to everyone that it struck a chord the wrong way with. I am so sorry for running my fat mouth about everything I said about Patreon before I even started. I mean, it's very typical for me. I have a lot of opinions that are based in nothing but hearsay, and I know that's not a good way to be, so believe me, that's my life journey, and that's what I'm aiming to fix. But I just wanted to apologize and really put that out there, that I should not have given it such a hard rap before I'd actually tried it myself. And I have a much deeper appreciation for everything that goes into a Patreon and how you all decide to run that. So please accept my apology, and let's get into it. Hopefully some of the stuff I have to say is very validating for you too. Like, I definitely ran into the problems that I'm sure you run into as well. So we can all be in that together. Okay, how it went, or if you don't know what it was, there was a 3-month period over the summer, so July, August, September, where I ran this kind of event program called Playtest Patreon, and I used Patreon as my website, kind of like the host for this like experience, because I wanted to get it to know Patreon. I wanted to know what it was about. It all stemmed from a conversation that I'd had earlier in the year. I used to get a lot of questions like, are you going to do Patreon? When are you going to do Patreon? Why have you not tried it? And I got this one kind of stuck in the back of my brain that was like, could you do Patreon? So I had a lot to prove all of a sudden. I just couldn't get over it, so we tried to prove that. And I'm glad to say that yes, I could do it. I just don't think it's for me long term. I think there are a lot of practical applications to use it for moving forward, but there are a lot of problems with the site that I do have an issue with, and I'm not looking forward to revisiting in the next iteration of Patreon for me. But I definitely couldn't do it long term, I don't think. Let's go and say what I did. So when you set up your Patreon, you can kind of make a landing page for people to look at, which is really great. I think it's nice to have, you know, a branding in there, and you can have some beautiful images. You can set up your rewards tiers, and I got to do that a few weeks before I'd even told anyone what we were doing, and it was all in planning for a long time before that. One of the biggest, most helpful things I did in the planning stage was read all the frequently asked questions in Patreon's blog. I feel like that really set me up to know what people were having an issue with on the site from a creator standpoint and from a patron standpoint, because typically it's all the ones that keep coming back are the ones that they'll answer and fix. So I think it's a really good tip for you if you're going to set up a Patreon to read the frequently asked questions section and just get a feeling for what you might be encountering. Because unfortunately, when you set up the page, you can't actually put any content on there or get a feel for how it all works behind the scenes until you launch it. And I do feel like we could have had a soft launch and kind of just eased people into it, but that's, you know, it was only 3 months anyway, so I didn't want to risk people not knowing about it until the end, and I wanted to make sure that everyone really knew that, like, you know, July 1st I was definitely going to have this Patreon up. Unfortunately, when I pressed launch, there was nothing on there to look at, so everyone that pledged, which was crazy, I think we had about 80 people pledge in the first day, which was really insane and kind of knocked me off my feet a little bit. I wanted to get on there and put content up there immediately so that people didn't feel like they just pledged and, you know, handed over money and there was just nothing there. But I think most people understood that it was the first day, and the content came quick and hard and fast, and it was consistent, which was a good thing, and I think that's something I'll get onto later. But yeah, so I kind of launched it that first week, well, the first day. It kind of, Patreon also crashed. I've noticed that Patreon tried to rejig things every month. Well, the 3 months that I was on there, it was like they were changing processing systems for payments or something, which I do remember there was an email about something like that. And so there was a lot of crashing that happened from my end, and it wasn't ever like typically long. It wasn't like, you know, a week's worth of, you know, Patreon being down, but it was frustrating because I think it crashed the first day that I got on there, and I was trying to learn and have that learning curve, and then suddenly I couldn't even be on the site anymore. So a bit glitchy, I'm not gonna lie. It was a little difficult, and cross-platforms, I have Apple products. I do notice that there's an issue with some of the apps not behaving the same way that the desktop does behave, and things like there's glitchy things that just happen, because it is, you know, I don't believe Patreon is as established a platform as most people might think it is. I think it is a good platform, but it's essentially, and it's been called this before, and I do kind of understand why, it is a glorified blog post. The cat is gonna try and get in and ruin my video. Do you want to get in? So yeah, I do believe that it could be considered a glorified blog post, because essentially you're putting it up there blog style. There's a feed of content that comes through. You put videos up there, podcasts, maybe just images. It's a lot. So as far as that goes, I think it's a glorified blog post with a payment processing system is how I could understand what the website is in essence. But you know, it's not well, I wouldn't really say it's social media, but, you know, I just don't think it's as established as a lot of those websites that you know, don't typically crash. Having said that, Instagram and YouTube have been down in the past couple of months, like, so maybe everything's crashing and the internet's over. Goodbye. So I launched it, and then I was getting the content up pretty quickly, and I had a very strict upload schedule of videos for Monday and Friday. Wednesdays I had alternating blog posts and podcasts, and then every month I would have a digital download day, where it was at the start of the month, within that first week, you could download whatever those downloads were. So it would be collage sheets or swatch sheets or whatever the download was. So it was only 3 months, and I had it all scheduled out. In fact, I had it like literally all planned out. You can see here, I don't know if it's gonna focus, but I had, you know, like content, I had days, I had calendars and schedules. These are all video ideas just in case I ran out. I didn't even get around to all of those because I would just kind of go as I felt like it. But, you know, having it all planned out beforehand and knowing it was 3 months was a really easy way to keep on top of it. And I could totally understand how if this was just a regular part-time, not part-time, but like full-time career for people to be on Patreon, I could understand how even just like a slight delay in something would really kind of snowball into something a bit bigger of a problem. So I think it was a really good thing for me personally to only do 3 months because I knew I could cope with that. I knew that I had enough content pre-filmed that it wouldn't catch up to me until the end, which it did, and then that was a little stressful. But yeah, for the most part, I did upload everything on the day it said it was going to upload. All the content that was promised was given, and I don't think anyone had a problem with that. There was a couple of times where there were a few issues with people's expectations about content, and there is kind of a scam that goes on with Patreon sometimes where people join and I'll get to why this happens later, but people join, take the content, and then ask for a refund, and it just becomes like, how do you police that? How do you monitor that? It becomes really difficult. So it sucks, but sometimes it does really rely on an honor system, which doesn't work for me personally in this in the business sense, because you can't protect your interests that way. So that was kind of an issue for me, and I did have a problem knowing how to navigate that, but we'll get to how all of this come to be in the end. But for the most part, I just want to say it went totally fine. It went really well. There was no massive hiccups with any of the content that was going out. The biggest problem I had was a problem I could have avoided altogether, but it was the happy mailers. For the top tier, I essentially had 4 tiers. I had a $5, $10, $20, and $40 tier. And for the $40 tier, there was a happy mailer that was included. Actually, there's some of those boxes just there are happy mailers. And it was all new products that I was creating, and they would be the first ones to get that product before it would go to my Etsy store. And it was just a fun way to be able to, you know, create new products, kind of expand my line a little bit, and have the security and the safety net of, you know, investment capital to do that, because essentially everything that was created was funded through the top tiers. So it was a really fun thing to do. I think a lot of people had a great time kind of getting these presents. It was always, when you factored it out, like the retail value was worth more than being in that tier anyway. So if you factored that, if you got up to the $20 tier, you get the videos, the blog posts, the podcasts, the digital downloads. That's the $20 tier, and then you factored $20 on top of that. The retail value plus shipping always exceeded the $20 difference for that tier. So it was kind of like a deal that I was putting out there, but I never put it across like that because I didn't think it was like enough of a deal to put it across like that. But it was if you wanted all those pieces, it was better for you to be in that tier than it was just to buy them from my Etsy store. So that was a fun little thing to be able to offer on Patreon as an incentive, I should say. Rewards tiers though, let's just chat about that for a second. It is super hard to know how to set them up because at the end of the day, you're gonna have to value your work, and value is so subjective. It's up to whether people think that that is worth that amount of money or if it's not. And I have a different opinion as to what something might be worth and valued at, as opposed to, you know, Mary Jo over here who thinks it should be valued something different. And it's totally fine. I think we should all respect each other in that. And I don't think anyone should put across content, even if you don't believe it's good or if you believe it's too good, like whatever you think, that person has a right to put that across at a value that they feel respected at, and that they feel is worth their time and their effort and their energy and their passion. So I would never give anyone advice as to how to structure that and what price points you would enter, but if you take it from a business standpoint, you want to enter competitively. Now, I had a big problem with this because as I was looking at the bunch of people that were already in this space, I'm going to say mixed media arts and crafts, but I'm including kind of scrapbooking in that as well, because there's a set of people in Patreon already that have, I feel like, a majority of the people who would possibly pledge in this niche category. And it's niche, but don't get me wrong, you can make a ton of money off of it. So we'll get to that later too. But the fact is, like, you want to enter that and be competitive so that people would like to join your Patreon. It's not good enough to say that, oh, well, I'm worth this, so I'm just going to wait for, you know, someone to join. It wouldn't kind of be worth your time at that point to have the Patreon if it was just 1 or 2 people at a higher price. Maybe it is for you. I don't know. I can't speak because it's going to be different for everybody. But my personal approach was to enter competitively. But I struggled with that because my pricing structures for Etsy are so that you know, one collage sheet on Etsy, or perhaps if it's a seasonal, like a Christmas or a Halloween or like a birthday special, I'll do a multiple collage sheets for $15, and that's the download, and that's it, all said and done, thank you, goodbye. But on Patreon, I noticed that people had structured a lot of rewards in for not a lot of money, and it's totally fine, but for me to enter competitively, I was looking at everything I had priced and I thought, this is never going to make sense. I could never offer a collage sheet. What are my videos really worth? Because if I keep them on YouTube, I can make AdSense revenue, so if I break them down, this video is technically worth $80. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's pricing structures that are already in place for my business, and that's something that I really struggled to figure out how to put on Patreon. At the end of the day, I abandoned everything I knew and just thought, let's just go competitive. I want to get the most out of this experience. So if I really need to understand how people on this platform survive and make a full-on business out of it, then I want to do what they're doing and see if I would change anything about that, but I'll let myself figure that out afterwards. So essentially what I did was take the best offerings of everyone that I saw in my market research. I took it at a price point that was a touch higher than that, because honestly, even though I was abandoning it, like letting all of it go, I still thought I couldn't do it for that price. Like, it was not. I assumed that not many people would join, and I was so blown away by the fact that we got up to like over 300 patrons. Honestly, I never thought that would happen. So, because it was an experiment, it was an experience, it was a play test, I thought a few people would jump on board, and, you know, my conversion rate is such that maybe we would have some success with it, but it was a big risk. So, and I was happy to take the risk, but at the same time, I didn't want to burn out just for trying something. So, I structured it in a way that I thought, you know what, it'll work or it won't. We'll figure it out. and it did, and I was really, really happy about that. I noticed that multiple people only joined the Patreon because it was 3 months, and it was something that they could visualize the whole package being worth, say, $60. If you're at $60, then you got nearly 30 videos and 3 months worth of collage downloads, and, you know, 6 blog posts, 7 podcasts, or however many they were. You know, you got like a lot. It was almost like $1 per offering, and people were willing to part with that. So that was where I kind of thought having it bundled together in a couple of months was a lot more palatable for people than saying, oh, I'm going to open-endedly subscribe to this, because you know, what if you do get invested and then you have changes in your financial position, and, you know, even that happened over the 3 months, and it does become it becomes a little heartbreaking to see that people have to come and go and they don't want to miss out. So we'll leave that, because that's not from the that's from the patron side, which I'm a patron of a couple of Patreons as well, so I do feel like some of this information might come from both sides, having seen, like, you know, the back end and the front end. So I don't know, I'm hoping I'm still with you here, but if not, it's totally fine. I'm just gonna put the information out there. Everything went well except for the happy mailers. And the happy mailers, if I could cut a long story down to nothing, I had a window of production times and things just went wrong. And it's things that really were outside of their control, were outside of my control. Sometimes, I feel like the person that really could have come through and saved the day was FedEx. Why did I have so many FedEx issues? I don't know. Honestly, I've never really had that much of an issue with FedEx before. A couple of times in my life, a few issues, but was just consistently a problem for me in those happy mailers. Also, I'll get to this in the end too, Patreon wasn't super helpful as far as having physical products on offer because there's no mailing integration on Patreon, so that was also another issue that I had to figure out for myself. But that's how it went, and you know, in September, at the end of September, I closed it all down, and I let everyone take the content and have it accessible after the fact, because I didn't want anyone to lose access to something that they had paid for or that they wanted to look at after the fact. Now I see it as this big bundle of content that you paid $60 for. So yeah, pretty good. It was also a really good way for me to think about moving forward in doing online courses and stuff as well. And what was valuable, I actually used a lot of that experience to kind of test certain ideas out or test certain editing styles, or you know, I was doing the vlogs through that as well. Or did I stop that? I don't know when I did a studio vlog last. No, I did it through then. I think I stopped when the whole thing was over. It was a lot. But yeah, let's get to the pros and cons, because this will start to really pick apart what happens on Patreon, and hopefully I can give you a few workarounds if you're either having these issues or you might run into these issues. One of the pros that I've kind of said from the beginning, and this is why Patreon exists, it's good money if you can get it. If you can get it. Otherwise it's a lot of work for possibly next to no money or financial payoff. I'm talking about from a business perspective here. Please don't think, and this has been brought to my attention before, please don't think I'm some like money hungry evil person. A lot of what I do and my mission statement is still making sure that you have accessible content, and even throughout Patreon there were still videos on YouTube every week. There were still Instagram posts, we did Instagram live, I was still on the Facebook group. Like I've always made sure that everything's been accessible. This was a separate offering. This was something that, you know, in full transparency, you know, it was a test and it was an experience, but I was hoping to learn something from this to be able to take it into the future. At the end of the day, I still got to pay to have this office and this studio space and to have art supplies to test and play with, and you know, it's just one of those things that, like, I would love for there to be no business attached to this at all and it could just all be fun, but I do have to be smart about the way that I'm able to keep offering this to you, because if I were financially struggling in all these other ways, you just have to agree that, you know, what would go first is probably stuff that wasn't being any kind of financially viable option for me. And you know, to be honest, putting YouTube up is great. I have AdSense revenue, but they've changed the algorithms, so it's actually becoming a lot less. And affiliate links are great too, but you know, that stuff changes, and you know, you really can't rely on this stuff unless you have millions of subscribers, and that's just not my reality. So you know, the Etsy store is my main source of income, but Patreon does offer this solution for people, and I do believe this is why a lot of people join Patreon, to be able to create a salary for yourself, to be able to be paid doing a job that isn't typically paid very well, or you know, there are opportunities for artists out there and mixed media artists to do great things, but they're few and far between, and it's a lot of freelance work. So even you might be paid a big chunk of money for this, but you got to stretch that out for the rest of the year because you don't know when your next gig's going to come up. And so here I am again, getting all upset about the money talk. Let's just get over that. It's great money if you can get it. That's all I want to say. Do some simple math. If you got a $10 tier and you got 300 people joining it, that's $3,000 a month. This is not any number that relates to me. I personally saw major financial success from Patreon for the 3 months. It was technically, when I broke it all down as a weekly salary, it was more than I've ever been paid doing any other job. And yes, it was really difficult to close it in September, but that was never what this was about. If I wanted to keep the money, I would keep going with Patreon. But unfortunately, that's not what I set up for myself. No, not unfortunately. I had a lot of other stuff to do. I really wanted to commit to Inktober. I know that it's a lot of give and take. You can't fully be focused on one thing over here and forget the reason you started doing it in the first place. So yes, as someone that loves financial security, it was really difficult to close it after the financial success that it became. And I also saw that there was a lot of growth potential there because I ended up with over 300 patrons, but other people in my field also have over 500 patrons. And that is like, it's just a lot of money. I don't think people really understand, but if you just do some basic math, I mean, most of us aren't working. I don't say most of us. I don't know who watches the channel, but you might be all balling out of control. But I've never really worked jobs before where I could earn up to 10 grand a month. You know what I mean? Sounds like a pyramid scheme. But when you think about how Patreon works, and it's a certain money, and for a month, it's a pseudo salary. I mean, it goes up and down. People pledge and people unpledge, and it's fickle in the sense that if you stop offering what you were offering before, people might not like that, or people might just get sick of it, or you might have said the wrong thing and everyone wants to leave. So it's not guaranteed, but if you can guarantee it for a couple of months, I mean, you're kind of set up for the year. So I want to just put that out there. It is great money if you can get it, and that's a big if. A lot of the people on Patreon or that start Patreon pages don't see that kind of success where it could fully fund a lifestyle, where it could be your full-time work and career. Or if you are one of those people, or what I tend to notice about people that do have Patreon as a full-time career and a way to do that, almost 100% of the focus of their efforts are placed on Patreon, and it does become a bit difficult to grow outside of that. And so if you're only growing within Patreon, I'm not saying, I mean, you can have an Etsy store and maybe that's funding some of the capital for your manufacturing ventures. Like those are all great things, but if you focused on growth, if you want to be bigger than the few hundred people that will join you on Patreon, or possibly 1,000, I don't know what the reach might be for you, but if you want to grow beyond that, you will find a really hard time doing it just in Patreon. And if you are having a lot of success, the temptation would be to put all of your focus and your energies and efforts there. What I have tend to notice, and what I did notice straight up before I even actually pressed launch, was that a lot of people were upset that I decided to do it because they were saying that I was a sellout. I completely understand where that comes from, and I completely agree that from past experiences, I have myself seen creators that I've really loved before. I've loved lots of public content and free content from me. Selfishly, I love the free content. What am I going to say? I don't not love free content, but I understand that as someone that's in this field, they also need to make a living and support their families and do what they need to do, and Patreon was a viable option for those people. But a lot of people do get upset because they feel like, oh, well, I'm going to lose out now, like I can't afford that, or I don't want to have to pay for it. And there's a bunch of different reasons why people might do that, and that's for those people to figure out. But at the end of the day, I know my own mission was to do Patreon and to also offer the accessible content that I've always been offering. And I was really happy to do that. It was a lot of work, but very committed to it. So I'm fully fine to do that. I just wanted to say, it's only the top few percent that actually make it, even just a workable salary. And then there's a really minimal fraction up the top that make tons and tons of money off Patreon. But like anything else, for the majority of people, it is a slow and steady grind to get anywhere. So just want to put that out there. Great money if you can get it. Oh, and speaking about money, I think one of the other great pros about it was that money that I had from the tier, I also got to reinvest in my business and create new products. Always a great thing to do. A lot of, well, not a lot, every single product I've ever manufactured has been funded through my own savings, and having immigrated to the States and spent a lot of my life savings, moving countries and setting up a life for myself, I actually didn't have a lot of money to invest in a business, but I didn't want to get a loan. Also, technically couldn't get a loan here. I have no credit score. I wasn't even qualifying for a credit card, so I was kind of just out on the last 50 to 100 bucks I had, and that's when I made my first books and started selling those. And from those first books, I have reinvested that money over and over and over again to the point where I have some working investment capital for my own business that was fully funded from a couple of books that I sold a few years ago. So having Patreon was such a great way to get more of that revolving capital in the business. So now I can risk-free manufacture. I don't have to worry about, should I make these stamp sets or should I have rent for next month? Which is a reality. That's just how the world goes. So it's super great pro for me. Like as a business owner, that was just one of the nicest feelings, knowing that I wasn't going to be in any kind of financial distress or foreseeable financial distress for the future. Great pro. But the con with all of that is that even if you do have the great money, it is dependent upon how many people follow you, and there's usually a drop in numbers every month because some people just subscribe month to month and choose to do it again, but it ebbs and flows. So hopefully there's a nice baseline for you, and that would be great. I personally saw an exponential growth, and especially towards the end, since it was closing and there was the option of everyone downloading the content that they had access to. That was also a great way for people to feel like they were still going to get the value out of that 3-month experience, even if they only joined for the last month. So technically, I fully had a great financial experience, let's just say that. Another pro, it's a new platform, so for someone like myself who just operates off of Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, I had never done a blog post before, and I'd never done a podcast before. I shouldn't say never, I did the Davin Party blog posts, but actually doing, some of my own stuff and putting my own stories in there, getting a little bit more personal, I found like that was a really great thing to do. There was still a lot of me that was very reserved, because even though I know that people had to pay to get into Patreon, the internet is the internet, and if someone really wanted to know my secrets, it would have cost them $5 to read that blog post. So I'm skeptical and cynical like that. I never saw that Patreon was a safe place. It's as safe as anywhere else on the internet, so I never felt like sharing anything too revealing about, any kind of like deep dark secret I ever had. But I did get a little bit more personal. I opened up a bit more about my home life, a bit more about my story, my gran, my mom, my just like real things that I don't really share on YouTube. And I don't know why that happened on there, because to be honest, I feel like I would be tempted to say that stuff on YouTube as well. I don't know, YouTube just seems like such a broader scope, but we'll see, maybe in the future. A con was pricing competitively. Like I said, it's a smaller kind of market, mixed media arts and crafts, and there's a lot of the people that would technically pledge already are pretty much pledged to this following, and maybe cross-pledged to a couple of different creators. There's a bit of an issue that I noticed with that too. Not terrible, but I'll tell you what it's about later. The idea that you would go in kind of offering the same amount for the same price, it just becomes a bit of a, which cereal do I want to eat today? I don't eat cereal, but you know what I mean? Like, you're just kind of picking from one. And most people, whether it was priced differently or the offering was different, are going to go with the creator that they want to follow. It's not so much, I've noticed, about the content or the consistency or the quality or the price or the frequency. It's not anything about that, I've noticed, at the end of the day. Having been a creator and a patron, what I've noticed is that if people like the person, they see it as a kind of support to that person, and that they almost feel like it's a bonus to get the videos. I'm not like that. I don't want to make anyone feel uncomfortable here, but when money changes hands, I feel like the responsibility that I feel like everyone should feel, in that business is business. And so if you've provided money to get the content that I had promised you, that's what you're going to get. That's the transaction. Hopefully we can have a great time throughout that. But that's not the general sense that I get from a lot of Patreons, because there's a lot more of a personal investment in the other Patreons that I've noticed. And I've talked to people before, this is before I even joined Patreon, so I'm not talking about anyone in particular here, but just from what I've noticed, a lot of people see it as a way to support and literally be a donor or a patron. To me, that's why I see like websites like GoFundMe or Kickstarter almost like a charitable or like a pledge amount to a project or something. Patreon, I think, is just whatever you want to make of it. So some people do use it a bit like a GoFundMe. Some people do use it a bit like a Kickstarter. To be fair, I guess I used it kind of a bit like a Kickstarter, in that I was using that money to finance some of my manufacturing ventures. So there's a lot of different ways that people will structure it. Ultimately, at the end of the day, setting those rewards tiers is a little tricky, and I just encourage you to do with whatever you know you're going to be happy to put across. You don't want to sign anything on a dotted line and be happy about it, smiling from ear to ear, then 2 months later realize that everyone else is getting more money and you're not happy anymore. I've seen this as an issue when I used to work on cruise ships, and we would always have to re-sign our contracts. Contracts were negotiable. What I was happy to sign at one point, I suddenly wasn't happy when I realized what everyone else was making. I actually left a contract because of that before, and then, life happened, like it was a regret, whatever, but I'm throwing myself under the bus here too. You don't want to do that, and I think from personal experience, if you were happy to do that then, like, please stay happy about that, and that's why I would encourage you from the beginning to make sure that you really know that this is something you're willing to do, even if the financial payoff isn't there for you. So if you're going to do one video a week and you only have, you make $40 a month from the patrons that you get, just know that you're okay to do that. To be fair, that's like being on YouTube, so you're not losing out there. But if you want to do 3 videos a week and you're only going to get that $40 a month, just know that that is dependent upon who does join your Patreon. So I would also encourage people to possibly try it in these 2 to 3 month versions, almost like a summer camp on Patreon. If you want to use that idea, please go ahead and use that idea, because I think it's a really great way to dip your toe in the water and understand it. And you could always choose to keep going after that if you wanted to. It wasn't my journey, but that's what you could do if you wanted to. Although I wouldn't promise that it was only 3 months and then keep going. Another pro, I feel like because it's a new platform, you have a new type of engagement. You really get to know your followers a lot better. You really get to engage in a bit more of an intimate way, a bit more of a personal connection, if that's the way you choose to do it. It is also just another avenue for people to communicate with you, which is always fun. This is a two-way street. I love to hear from you. I love to hear your stories and experience your creative journey with you just as much as you like to be here and help me through mine. So I really loved having another avenue to get to know people and understand people, and that was just a pro for me. It's a con. I think this is a con for people, I've heard. It's a lot of work, depending on how you set it up. But let's just say you're entering mixed media arts and crafts and you're trying to be competitive. Girl, it's a lot of work because everyone does the absolute ultra most plus. I don't know why, I don't know how that all happened, I don't know how that started. I'm gonna blame someone eventually, but no, it's a lot of work. Here's the thing, don't cry for me, Argentina, because I didn't have to do it. I think if you're going to choose to do it, just commit, just do it. You could always choose to not do it, you know what I mean? Like if you're the boss of your own business, then you can totally restructure and you can do what works for you. What I've noticed in any of these circumstances where being on the creator side, being on the patron side, if things are going to change, my biggest piece of advice is be fully transparent. One of the things that I struggled with most was those happy mailers not going out when I wanted them to. Now I never promised that they were going to go out on like the 3rd of the month, but I wanted them to go out in the first week, and typically they went out on about the 8th, which is technically the 2nd week of the month. So that was never a promise that I had not fulfilled, but it was a personal goal of mine that really screwed up a lot of my other scheduling issues, and it was just really frustrating for me. But instead of lying about it or telling people like, oh no, they're coming or they're in the mail or something, being fully open and transparent, even if it really hurts and really sucks and you don't want to say anything. For me, I don't want to ever admit defeat. I don't want to ever admit that something's out of my control. I just had to do it, and I noticed that people are just so much more receptive to the honest truth than for people to just be like, whatever, like, I don't know. So what I'm meaning to get at is it is a lot of work, but if you find that it is a lot of work, you can scale it back. You can say, you know what, guys, I've been doing 2 videos a week, but I can't manage that anymore. I'm going to do 1 video a week. I'm also going to drop that tier price down because I feel like the value's not the same now. So if you'd like to stay subscribed, but this is going to allow me to either grow off of Patreon or allow me to keep on top of my work. I'm not going to miss so many things. But yeah, it can be a lot of work, and it's totally up to whatever you put in your rewards tiers. Here's the thing with that. Rewards tiers are, in my personal opinion, contractual, just because money exchanges hands. And I don't know how it works all around the world, but what I do know about America is that there's a big refund and exchange policy, and it's pretty much I mean, you could use a whole lipstick and return it to the counter and they would give you a refund or a store credit. So I'm always really, really careful about how I conduct business in the States, because I never want to put across something that isn't truthful, because I know that it could come back. I get sued for it here. You get sued for anything. So one of those things in the rewards tiers I would encourage you to really, really look at is, are you actually going to do every single thing in that rewards tier? It's okay to offer incentives, and you might think that like, oh yeah, I'm definitely going to do everything, but please stay on top of it. I know that was something that I really made sure no one could come sideways at me and you know, ask for a refund because I didn't do anything properly, or you know, pull me under the bus because I wasn't giving them what I promised them. Like it's never a problem if you're just offering it. Like on YouTube, if I said, oh, I'm gonna give you guys 2 videos a week and we'll see, and I gave you 1 video a week, it wouldn't really matter. But if you paid to watch 2 videos. Like if you're paying your Hulu subscription, your Apple TV subscription, and they just decided not to upload the new episodes of what you like to watch every week, even if you really love that show and even if you see the value in Hulu, you're going to start getting annoyed that you're not having the content that you paid for and that you were promised, or you were guaranteed by signing up. Also, Patreon even warns you against this. Don't entice people with something. Don't do the bait and switch. Don't say like, oh, I'm going to give you like you're definitely going to get like 3 blog posts from me this month, and then because I don't decide to do blog posts, I'm just going to give you a consolation prize of something else. You have to stay committed to those rewards tiers, but here's the best part. If you're just open and transparent, you can change them. You can say, I can't do that anymore. It's not sustainable for me. I want to try something different. I'm just going to restructure it. So that's my biggest piece of advice to you, because I want you to stay safe and protected as a creator. I don't want you to have any of these financial issues, and it's nice to think that there are lovely people out there and that only those people are going to engage with us, but it just takes one person to want to take you down to find the easiest angle to do it, and that's just obviously my own cynicism talking, but it is my personal experience, and I just don't want you to have to run into those issues. So that would be my biggest advice for, it's a lot of work, but make sure you're happy to do that work, make sure you're committed to that work, make sure you put that work across the way that you said you would, and you shouldn't run into any problems with that. You will always run into problems, but technically, if you're covered, if you're safe, then you're good, right? So that's my advice for that. One of the pros was the happy mailers. I just loved it. I love to produce the new products. I love to design them, manufacture them. I love seeing them in here. I love having boxes all around my studio. I loved all of that. The con with that is that there is no mailing integration system on Patreon. So all of the addresses that I had, all of the information that I had to send out people's happy mailers, I had to take from Patreon and put onto an external website. Also, the USPS don't sell first class mail rates unless you have this downloadable application, which you need a PC for. I don't, I have a Mac. So what I ended up having to do is buy a subscription for $16 a month to stamps.com and put all of them through there. Now, stamps.com only recently it did this thing where I could batch order. So I used to have to individually put in every single name and address, and there was about 150 of the happy mailers that were going out, and it just took a lot of time. Also, there was a lot of boxes flying around this house and a lot of product and stock, but ultimately I saw it as a great thing because I got to be pushed to design new things and try new things and have different offerings out there, and I think people really appreciated having, like first dibs on something. I'm notorious for never ordering enough stock and people getting really upset about my Etsy launches, but this time there were definitely, like, if you had the subscription, you were going to get the box. Sometimes if people didn't subscribe to the happy mailer tier, like if you didn't press Bianca Sophia happy mailer tier and put your address in, if you just pledged $40, because you can just pledge random amounts on Patreon. I don't know how that works, but there are a few people that were just pledging random amounts. If you weren't in the tier, it wouldn't recognize you as one of those patrons. So I did have a few patrons that I had to go back and resend. Well, not resend, I had to send for the first time, but we had to communicate that outside of the mailer tier because there was just an issue with not being included in the spreadsheet. So that was like a little bit of extra work, but it wasn't a big problem. All I'm going to say is if Patreon decided to put the mailing integration in there like Etsy has, I'd pay the $16 an extra a month to Patreon. I just don't feel, I never felt great about taking people's personal information to another website. I knew that I could trust myself, but I don't know stamps.com. I read enough reviews to know that it was safe and that I was going to be able to do what I needed to do. But at the same time, when you sign up to Patreon and you put your information there, you don't expect for it to be taken somewhere else. Unfortunately, there's no way around it if you're going to send something out. So I think that Patreon could benefit from mailing integration. One of the biggest things that Patreon could benefit from, and I'm sure everyone's going to hear this if you do videos, a video hosting on the website. It is just beyond me that videos have to be externally embedded into the Patreon blog post. I understand it because I know the bandwidth would be super expensive for all of that. At the same time, this is where that content theft starts to come in. This is where that honor code really starts to fall apart. Essentially, all of the videos that I have are unlisted videos on YouTube, so anyone with a link can see them. You just have to ask your patrons, please don't share that link. Now, people are going to share that link. People are going to share that link if they want to share that link, and there's not much you can do to stop that except just possibly remove the video altogether, and then it's one person ruining it for everyone. The way around this is just have video hosting on Patreon. That way people can't take the video unless they manually download it somehow, hack the system and get in there. I just don't think it's safe enough to have people embed videos, especially if that's a rewards tier that is so popular for so many patrons. So that's something that I would really recommend that needs to be changed quick smart, is video hosting on the site. Just so that people, you know, essentially what was happening with this scam that people were doing, and I don't want to explain it too much because I feel like it's going to encourage people to do it, but people were pledging, taking all the downloads and the content that they could, which included a lot of video links, and they were also asking for a refund after that and then disappearing, or they would just unpledge, like pledge, take all the stuff and unpledge. That is technically, I guess, theft. I'm not quite sure what grey area it falls into. I just know that it's kind of shady, so it's and it's something that you can't really do anything about. But Patreon could help fix that if you could put the video on the site as opposed to embed it from YouTube or Vimeo or whoever you use to host your videos. So that's one that I would do there. I'm gonna leave you with one last con and one last pro. I know this has been super long, I'm so sorry. Hopefully it's informative, like I said. My koala fluff is coming out. The last con, I don't want to say it out loud, but it really irritates me. And I just, it's a culture problem on Patreon. It's self-policing, and Patreon encourages it. So essentially, if you have pledged to a creator, and this is, I'm going to speak from both sides right now, so please don't think that this is about anyone or this is, you know, a specific instance. I'm just going to talk about the issue at large, and hopefully we can see a bit of a resolution there. If you pledge to someone, and you know, as a patron, you're expecting a bunch of content, right? You're expecting the rewards that you paid for. Now, whether you like the content creator or want to give them a free pass or not, at the end of the day, you're obligated to give those rewards as a creator. And you should want to do that because you set it all up and you have a great time doing it. So, you know, for me, if a patron comes to me and says, well, you haven't been delivering on all of your rewards that I'm offered, like, you're half late on this, I never got this video, where is this? It would be up to me to respond to that. You can go to Patreon, like the patron can go to Patreon and say, my creator isn't doing anything for me, like they're late on this stuff, or they've just changed the tiers without telling us. You can tell Patreon that, but Patreon's response is, you could leave. And it's kind of up to the consumer at that point to be like, well, why does this all fall on me? Like, where's the accountability here? And honestly, I do see a problem with some creators leaving the accountability at the door when it comes to offering on their rewards tiers. And so this is a big problem because it creates this culture of self-policing, which, since Patreon absolved themselves of any kind of responsibility as far as monitoring rewards and how they're given, because I just don't think they could possibly do it unless they had a team, but you know, I don't know why they don't, but they've kind of absolved themselves of responsibility. If the creator then absolves themselves of that accountability and that responsibility, it's left up to the consumer, to the patron, who at the end of the day was the person that invested their money and their time and their efforts and their energies into you. So, and I'm saying you as in like the proverbial creator you. So for me, I always understood that responsibility. I never wanted to give anyone that impression. I did have a couple of instances where people, I don't want to go into it because I don't want to name and shame or anything, but it was thought that I delivered something a day later, but it was a bonus and it was a calendar, and it became a bit of an issue that I didn't see coming. And honestly, at the end of the day, because I hadn't violated any of those terms, it was up to me to say, well, nothing was wrong here and I'm sorry, so we'll just leave it at that. However, if something was wrong, then that consumer is totally justified calling me out on it. Now, the last place you want to be called out is publicly and online, and the last place that I think any creator trying to make a living off of Patreon wants to be called out is in Patreon, because it starts to breed this discourse amongst patrons, and you suddenly don't feel like you want to be in there anymore. Even as a creator, like it doesn't take a lot for us to get in and get out of stuff. So, you know, it builds a bit of a wall up there, and you're just kind of struggling to keep your heart soft and move forward with that. So what I want to say is that there's a responsibility on the creator's part to keep accountable to themselves, to everything that you decided to set up. So really own that, and really make sure that that isn't cause for concern for people, because Patreon aren't going to step in there and resolve those issues for you. And what happens is your patrons start to get really discouraged, and they start to get really frustrated, or they start to get like they're feeling like they're being taken advantage of, or being used for money, or for notoriety, or for clout, or for, you know what I mean? Like there's a bunch of reasons that we could start to feel like, well, you just want us here for our money, basically. So what I'm going to say is that culture then translates when one of those patrons who has been so discouraged by one particular creator enters another creator's space. And if you've already got the idea that the only way I'm going to get my content over here is if I hark on, and if I keep telling this person I have to keep them accountable, and I'm definitely going to message them every 3 days, then when you move to another Patreon and you think that there's one thing off, your self-policing kicks in, and you start to think, well, I'm going to have to do the same with this creator. And then it encourages that behavior. So there is, ultimately, I think in the umbrella of everything that's going on here, there's a culture of self-policing because that's the way it's set up. I think it could be avoided, and I think it could be helped if creators, if we kept ourselves accountable and made sure that there was no cause for concern for the patrons, even if, and this is where I'm going back to transparency, even if there is a problem, even if you do need to change something, even if you need to say that something's not coming, transparency, honesty, commitment, dedication, passion, all of these things are stuff that people can hold on to and make sure that they know that they're actually not being taken advantage of and they're not being used for their money. I know that's going to rub people the wrong way, but honestly, it was one of the issues that I had, because beyond everything else that could go wrong logistically on running a Patreon like that, it's your heart that you've got to kind of watch in any of these social media spaces, and it doesn't take a lot to like really start breaking somebody down. And there, sometimes people get into this a bit of a pack mentality, and sometimes they don't mean to. But if there's enough people that have been in this self-policing culture before, they're all going to band together and they're all going to attack because they just want you to do well so that they can feel happy for you. And it can almost seem noble at the end of the day, but it is an issue. And so I want to put that out there. I think the responsibility really does fall on the creator at that point. I also do believe in part that Patreon should be accountable for monitoring Patreons. I don't know how they would do that, and I feel sorry that I'm even mentioning it, but you know, there needs to be, I think if people are reported, I think Patreon should definitely step in and say, look, you're not offering this anymore. This is, you know, it goes against the terms and conditions that you signed up for. Change your content or leave. That's how I know business to work. Personally, I know that there's a lot of other feelings that go in there, but I want to kind of give you the most well-rounded view I can before I leave you with the most positive thing that happened. It's so random. It's not the most positive thing that happened, but it is a really good thing considering we're talking about Patreon. Patreon actually called me halfway through, emailed me halfway through that experience and asked if I would get on a conference call with them to talk about the experience. Now, none of this is sponsored, obviously, because I said a lot of bad things. No, I mean, I would be honest even if it was sponsored. Like, I also don't take sponsorships just for anything. I've actually never taken a sponsorship. I guess a design team is kind of like a sponsorship. You don't get paid for it though, so I'm not quite sure. No, I don't think I've been sponsored. Hi, sponsors. I don't know what sponsor would be watching a 40-minute video. Anyway, so Patreon actually contacted me halfway through and said, would you like to get on a conference call? We'd love to talk about your experience and what's going wrong and how things can be better, or just like your overall feedback on the website. So I think it was just a very generic call. And they offered to give me an Amazon gift card as well, which I was like, this is a scam. I'm definitely not replying to this email. Turns out it wasn't a scam. I did get on a phone call with these two lovely women from Patreon, and we just discussed for over an hour. We were just chatting about the experience, and they were kind of curious as to why I did it for 3 months and what that was all about and how people were receiving that. So I got to bring them all of these things, the self-policing culture, the accountability that I feel like there should be, the video hosting, the mail integration for Patreons that have physical products to send out, the like everything that I felt like I wanted to bring to them, I got to bring. And there was no promises of fixing anything anytime soon, but the fact that Patreon are going out of their way to actually incentivize with an Amazon gift card a conference call to get feedback from creators real time as they're in their experience, I think just speaks volumes to how much they do want to be that for creatives. They do want to be a place where you can come, find some financial security, doing what you love to do the hard work, commit to it, see yourself grow, and have a bunch of people support you along the way that also believe in your vision and the way that you do things and want to be involved in that with you. So I think the website is there because it does need to be there. It is definitely a website I see a lot of value out of. Personally, moving forward, I can see myself doing new versions of Playtest Patreon, possibly for different seasonal events, like I was considering doing an Advent this year, but I just don't have the time to pre-film anything for that, so I just didn't want to. That was just gonna be a lot. But I'll probably be back next year with a different version of it, perhaps in the summer again, maybe something through Easter, I'm not quite sure. I would want to keep my experiences limited to a few months, just so that we can have a full-on idea about what's happening, and it's just really concise. I can't do Patreon long term. I just don't think I could commit to that. I feel like my growth in other areas would suffer, and I already do so much with the store and product designing and YouTube content, which I'm always trying to keep everything as accessible as I can. I think I'd start to really compromise the core values of what I do and why I do what I do. At this point in the business, my actual mission statement. So it kind of sucks. I'm just gonna say, like, it sucks because I really did enjoy it, and obviously when it becomes financially viable, it is so hard for someone like me to say goodbye to, that amount of money per month, and it is really, really tempting to just be like, let's do it again right now. But I want to be real with you. I want to keep it 100, as the kids say. It was a great experience, and I would definitely love to do it again. I hope the next time I get back on there, some of these issues have been fixed. I hope some things have changed. I also hope the culture of self-policing has probably died down a little bit. Who knows? It is what it is. Every kind of, YouTube comes with its trolls, Instagram comes with its own issues, and Facebook comes with a lot of issues. It's just everywhere, so you can't spend too much time worrying about it. But in the spirit of giving you everything that I had to deal with through the Patreon experience, that's just what I wanted to talk about. I hope it wasn't too candid in the way that it made you feel uncomfortable about anything. If you did, please reach out to me privately. I just don't want anyone to get into any arguments and fights in the comments below. But hopefully, if you were looking to join a Patreon, this was insightful for you. If you're in Patreon and you just wanted to know a bit more about it, hopefully that was good for you. If you don't know anything about Patreon still, I have to apologize, because that must have been a really boring video for you. That's all I'm going to get around to today. Is that all I had to say? Oh no! The last thing I had to say, I can't believe I almost forgot this. I'm actually going to offer all of the Playtest Patreon bundle as a package on Etsy. What happened when I closed the Patreon is that I put everything together on a OneDrive, and it's basically a folder, so it's got all the digital downloads in there, all the blog posts, all the podcasts. The blog posts are all formatted into cute little magazines you can print out and just have a flip through, and all the videos are in a PDF of links for you to be able to watch at your leisure. So what I'm going to do is bundle that all together and sell it for the same price that it would have been on Patreon. So $60 for the 3 months worth of content. It works out to be about $1 per offering. So if that's something that is totally worth it to you, then check it out. It will be on Etsy as the Playtest Patreon bundle. Basically, I wanted to do it because I got a lot of an expression of interest from people that missed out on the whole experience and wanted to have access to it. And I thought, well, there's really no way to access it now. I did think that I would be putting some of the stuff on YouTube, but I never thought I'd put the whole thing up on YouTube, and that's where I started to think, oh, people don't just want like 1 or 2 videos, they wanted the whole thing. So especially digital downloads, like I said, if they're $15 on my Etsy and you can get all of these for a bundle, like, it's insane. It doesn't make sense, but I'm going to offer that. So I have it all bundled together. What will happen is, as you purchase it, I will send you the email to the OneDrive, and you'll be able to download everything from there, or you can just look at it straight in the browser. You can click to the videos, have a look at all of that. I have to admit, some of the stuff will be dated because it was July, August, August, September. So I don't know if you're going to enjoy all of it at any point of the year, but there's a lot of great value in there. There's a lot of tutorials, there's a lot of digital download stuff, a lot of fun blog posts to read, podcasts that I just love to listen back to because, I don't know, I'm just like really into podcasts. I feel like I want to do a podcast channel, but at the same time I don't. I probably won't. I've still got so much to do, and I'm going on a holiday in a couple of weeks anyway. Either way, but so there's going to be a bundle on Etsy. You'll see it popping around. If that's something you want to get into, then by all means do that. I just wanted to make sure that you knew that that was going to be available, and hopefully people can still enjoy that experience, even though the playtest has ended. And that's all I'll leave you with. Thank you so much for sticking with me if you got this far. If you did, leave me a little star emoji in the comments just so that I know to reward you for your loyal viewing. Yeah, I'm going to leave it at that. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you again soon. Bye.